بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. Just a reminder with the Q&A. My dot
cbox
dot ws
yeah.
backslash
Thursday underscore night underscore Fiqh.
Thursday underscore night underscore Fiqh. So, continuing with the concept of Imam, and we stopped last time about who is more reliable to be an Imam, and we spoke about the sequence of who's first and then who is the last. And then now we will speak about who is makrouh to be an Imam. So, number one, the scholars they said knowledgeable but fasiq. When we speak about fasiq, meaning that he is committing some obvious sins and known to the community that he is committing these sins. The Prophet ﷺ in the authentic hadith said, women should not be imam for men or Bedouins for migrants, not fasiq for believer, unless he forces his power and the believer fear his sword or lash. So what does that hadith indicate? Number one, that women cannot be imam for men. So that's a fact. And what we see nowadays on the TV of some women leading the prayer over men, that's unacceptable in Islam. Or Bedouin for migrant. At that time, the Bedouins were not educated, were illiterate. So they did not know the knowledge, did not read the Quran properly. And the Muhajirin, the migrants, were the ones who were educated. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Bedouins cannot be imams over migrants, meaning that uneducated cannot be imam over educated. So the concept is knowledge of Sharia. Not fasiq for believer. So fasiq who is actually committing some sins that make him a fasiq cannot be an imam for a believer or a mu'min unless he forces his power and the believer fears his sword or lash. Meaning that this is what there is a concept in Islam called the forced leader. And coming to the question last week, coming from this hadith, last week there was a question at the end when we spoke about the Khalifa. And one of the requirements for a Khalifa is to be from Quraysh. So, one question came, does that mean that all the Ottoman Khalifas were not valid or the Ottoman Khilafah was not valid? Actually, the majority of the Khulafa during the time after the Khulafa al-Rashidin until the last 100 years when the Khilafah was dismantled, the majority of the Khulafa were not from Quraysh. But the Prophet ﷺ said, the al-wulatu min Quraysh, the leaders should be from Quraysh. That's why all the scholars they said that one of the main requirements, they listed 10 requirements for the Khalifa. One of the main requirements is to be from Quraysh, from the tribe of Quraysh. Now, what about the other Khulafa who were not from Quraysh? They land under what is called force by power leader. So the scholars mentioned about those leaders who came by force, in a way, to the Muslims, and their Khilafah is valid. But it's supposed to be that the Khalifa should be from Quraysh. Not all the Amirs not all the kings, not all the umara, but the Khalifa, which is the head of all the Muslims, should be from Quraysh. But because there has been some enforcement from the Umayyin, Abbasiyin, the Ottomans, then all of that is called enforcement, and this is acceptable Khilafah. The Khilafah is valid, but it's not supposed to be other than the tribe of Quraysh. So, number 2, who is makruh to become Imam? Someone who has a bid'ah that is not kufr. Bid'ah that is not kufr. So he's committing bid'ah, which is a known for the all scholars that it is bid'ah, but that bid'ah does not lead him to kufr. Then he can be an Imam, but his Imam is makruh. Blind. A blind person is makruh to be an Imam. Why is that? Because a blind person, the concept why the fuqaha or the scholars said, because the blind person, when he goes to the toilet, he cannot see actually if he was having some impurities on his clothes from urine or from whatever, so he cannot see all of that. That's why they said the blind is makruh to be an Imam, but that doesn't mean that his prayer is invalid. Okay? To be Imam for people who hate him. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith, 3, their prayers will not go above their heads 1 hand. One of them is an Imam for people and they hate him. And that hate requires to be a reasonable reason, hate. So a hate for a valid reason. So why did they hate him? Maybe because he is fasiq, maybe because he is actually not knowledgeable, his recitation is not good, whatever. Lengthening the prayer more than the sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ once, and we spoke about the hadith of Mu'adh, once a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, I stopped going to the masjid. He said to him, why? He said, because Mu'adh is lengthening the prayer a lot. So he brought Mu'adh and he said to him, are you creating fitna, O Mu'adh? Shorten the prayer for people, because there are weak people, there are old people, and so on. So, lengthening the prayer, someone who lengthens the prayer is makruh to be an Imam, unless all those who pray behind him agree to have a long prayer. Then, that's valid. Waiting for the people who are coming. If the Imam is, for example, in his ruku', it's makruh to wait for the people who are coming, especially if he knows them. So he knows, for example, that someone is coming. For example, his wife is going for wudu and he is lengthening the ruku' because he wants his wife to join the jama'ah. Then he knows that who is coming, so his intention of lengthening the ruku' now is directed towards a specific person. That cannot be in Islam, because that intention is actually sharing with the Allah Azza wa Jal pleasure. But in general, the Prophet ﷺ in a hadith, he used to pray and he used to lengthen the ruku' until he does not hear any sound of someone coming or entering on the masjid. Meaning that if you don't know, then that's fine. But if you know who's the person who's coming, so that should not happen. It is makruh to sing the Quran. So someone, there is taghanni bil Quran, or beautifying the sound, the voice with the Quran, and singing the actual Quran. Singing the actual Quran, it is makruh and should not happen. We have seen some new examples nowadays where the Quran is being as a song over music. I think you've seen it. You've seen it online. No. In one of the Muslim countries. It is makruh for the one who does not pronounce the letters clearly to be an Imam. So he is not switching. We said last time that if the person switches the letter, he cannot be an Imam. But if the letters are not clear, it is makruh for him to be an imam. The Bedouin, as we said, because they are illiterate, it's makruh for them to be imam if they are coming to the city. It is makruh for the imam to be at a higher place than the followers. So he's praying at a higher place or lower place than the people behind him. It's makruh. When the imam prayer invalidates. If the prayer of the imam was invalid at the time of the start of the prayer and the followers knew, then their prayer invalidates as well. So what happens is that, what if the imam did not have wudu and people came, prayed the whole prayer, and then found out, and the imam remembered after finishing, oh, I did not have wudu. Well, the scholars, they said they don't need to repeat the prayer. He needs. But if the people who are praying behind him came and they saw on his clothes some najasa, some impurity, that actually invalidates the prayer. Because one of the conditions of the acceptance of prayer that the clothes are clean from impurities. They saw that najasa, but they did not speak to him. So they knew that his prayer will be invalid, yet they followed him. That means that their prayer and his prayer are invalid. Other cases, no. Only the imam prayer is invalid, but the rest of followers will be valid. If the imam lost wudu during prayer, then his prayer invalidates, but the followers will not. And what should he do in this case? He should pull someone. The scholars, they said he should grab him from the clothes to the front. And, for example, if that person does not know where he is up to, he can point, for example, with his hands to his knees to show him that I am at the ruku'. For example, some people might not actually know exactly where the imam is. Or, for example, at the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, he might point to his mouth and so on to indicate to the person who is going to follow up with the prayer where he is up to. So, only sahu of the followers is covered by the imam. So sometimes the followers, they have sahu, meaning that they forgot something, or they were not comprehending what they are doing while they are praying. So that sahu is covered by the jama'ah. So the imam covers all of that sahu. You don't need, as a follower, to make sujood sahu, even though you have made sahu during the prayer. Why? Because your sahu is covered by the imam. But only that is covered by the imam. The rest is not covered. And we are going to speak about some mistakes that cannot be covered. Now let's come about a big issue that is usually highlighted, which is reading behind the imam. I will take some time about that. First of all, there are 4 ahadith, authentic ahadith, that the scholars rely on in regards to whether to read behind the imam or not to read. So, can you close the door, please? The first hadith that the scholars refer to when speaking about reading behind the imam is hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Whoever did not recite Surah Al-Fatiha, there is no prayer for him. Okay? So that's number 1. So meaning that it has to be recited, Surah Al-Fatiha. Hadith number 2, the Prophet ﷺ once was praying, and then after he finished the prayer, he turned to the people and he said to them, who recited behind me? So one of the companions said, I recited. He said, don't do, you confuse me while I am reading. So that's an indication not to read or not to recite. behind the Prophet ﷺ. Another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ turned to the companion and he said, who recites or who reads Quran while he is praying? He said, don't do except with Al-Fatiha. That's another hadith, authentic. And then the last hadith was, which hadith? Number 4. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So there is no prayer for the last hadith is the recitation of the Imam is a recitation for you. Okay, so these are the 4 hadith. So hadith number 1, there is no prayer without Surah Al-Fatiha. Hadith number 2, do not read behind me. Hadith number 3, do not read except with Al-Fatiha. Hadith number 4, the recitation of the Imam is a recitation for the followers. With these 4 authentic hadith, the scholars started to just gather them and to understand, so what to do. So Imam Abu Hanifa came and said, no recitation. The Prophet ﷺ said, don't recite. That's it. So Imam Abu Hanifa does not recite any Quran, even Al-Fatiha, even in the silent prayer behind the Imam. Okay? Imam Ahmad and Malik, they said, in the silent prayer, you read just Al-Fatiha. Or in the silent rak'ah, you read Al-Fatiha. But in the loud prayer or loud rak'ah, you don't read anything. Imam al-Shafi'i, based on the hadith of that there is no, if there is no recitation of Al-Fatiha, no prayer, he said you have to recite Al-Fatiha in each rak'ah. And this is the safest approach, is to read Al-Fatiha to actually come out of all of these differences. So Imam al-Shafi'i actually as well allows to read as well above Al-Fatiha small surah. For example, if you are Dhuhr or Asr, after in the first 2 rak'ahs, we know that we recite Surah Al-Fatiha and some surah. Imam al-Shafi'i said for the follower as well to recite that as well. So these are the differences. These are where the scholars are basing their opinion on, which are all hadith authentic. So, and at the end of the day, you need to look at this evidence and think, well, I am more comfortable to do this based on this hadith. Saying Ameen behind the Imam, it is sunnah to say Ameen behind the Imam, and the Prophet ﷺ said, when the Imam finishes and says وَلَضَّالِّينَ, say Ameen, as whoever matches his Ameen, the Ameen of the angels, he will be forgiven. So that's an advice actually to say Ameen behind the Imam after he finishes Surah Al-Fatiha. Some rulings. The prayer is invalid, and this happens a lot. When you come to the masjid and someone is praying and you tap on his shoulder for him to be the Imam, and the person just continues praying without saying Allahu Akbar loudly, and you are trying to tap on his shoulder to inform him that you are Imam, and he doesn't want. If that happens, actually, that connection between you and the Imam does not happen. So the prayer is not valid. No, the one in the back. His prayer is valid. He's praying for himself. But the one who is trying to connect himself as a ma'moom or a follower, his prayer is invalid. He needs actually to pray alone again or to pray with someone else. That mistake happens a lot, and I see it a lot, especially with those who are not knowledgeable. So when someone taps on their shoulder, they don't want to become Imam. Or some people actually, what happens is that they are praying Sunnah sometimes. And as we are going to see, the majority of the scholars, they do not accept that someone who is praying Sunnah to become an Imam for someone who is praying Fard. Or someone who is praying the different Fard to become an Imam for a different Fard. So that's why some people, they refuse to become Imams. It is allowed to leave the Jama'ah for a valid reason. So someone is, for example, Someone is dying next to you, you just straight away leave the Jama'ah. Someone is in need for help and support and you are hearing, you leave the Jama'ah and go and support and help the people. If the Imam passed the follower with 2 full pillars without valid reason, then the prayer of the follower is invalid. So for example, someone is having khushu', Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The Imam said, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin. He finished. And then said, Allahu Akbar. And the follower is still in reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. So that's 1 pillar. The Imam said, Sami Allahu liman hamida. That person is still standing and reciting Surah Al-Fatiha. How many pillars is he separated from him? Not full. The moment he says Allahu Akbar to go for sujood, these are 2 full pillars that he separates. If these 2 pillars actually happen, then the prayer of the follower is invalid. So it should not be that you are behind the Imam with 2 pillars full, unless there is a valid reason. Something like happened to you, sickness or something, that's a valid reason, then it can be looked at. But it should be that the person, if he sees the Imam going for ruku' and he's reciting Surah Al-Fatiha slowly, he needs to speed up in order not to be behind the Imam for long. If the follower catches the ruku' with the time of 1 tasbihah, then he catches the rak'ah. And we said about that, if the follower, for example, came late to the prayer, and then he said Allahu Akbar, went to ruku', and he said Subhana Rabbi al-Azim once, then the Imam said Sami Allahu liman hamida. Then he already got that rak'ah, even though he did not recite Surah Al-Fatiha. This is the only time when we cannot, or we allowed not to recite Surah Al-Fatiha if we are catching the ruku'. But if I said Allahu Akbar, and the Imam said Sami Allahu liman hamida, I did not finish the full tasbihah. Then I was confused whether I arrived or I got the rak'ah or not. The answer is I did not. And then I need to make up that rak'ah.
What's the opinion of sometimes you see kids in the masjid don't just wait to ruku' and then they go down?
Yeah, they are playing. Let them have fun. No problem. They just run the whole masjid in order to catch the ruku'. Most of them are actually youngs, just kids. If the follower is masbuq, when we say masbuq, meaning that he left or arrived at the prayer and the Imam already finished couple of rak'ahs. If the follower is masbuq, missed rak'ah or more, then he needs to make it or make them up. Now the question is, if I came, for example, to Salat al-Dhuhr, I came on the 3rd rak'ah. I missed how many rak'ahs? 2. Okay? Now, 3rd and 4th rak'ah for the Imam are 1st and 2nd rak'ah for me. So, when I stand up after the Imam finishes, the scholars differed. Now, I have to make up 2 rak'ahs. Am I making up rak'ah number 1 and 2? Or I'm making up rak'ah number 3 and 4? So some scholars, they said, no, it doesn't make sense because what you left actually is rak'ah number 1 and 2. So number 3 and 4, you will read Fatiha and Surah. Do you understand from where they are coming? Because you are missed these rak'ahs. Whereas the other scholars, they said, no, you already prayed rak'ah number 1 and number 2. So when you come to 3 and 4, normally in the 3 and 4, you only recite Surah Al-Fatiha. So you only recite Surah Al-Fatiha. Regardless, if you have time, then go for the maximum because this is Sunnah and you can get more reward. Regardless if it is accepted for you 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, then inshallah should be accepted better than not. Whoever catches the ruku' from the last rak'ah of Friday prayer, then he needs to add 1 rak'ah, and that's Jum'ah for him. So someone came on the prayer of Jum'ah, second rak'ah, at the ruku', got the rak'ah. Then he got the prayer, the Friday prayer. If he did not get the ruku' of the second prayer, then he missed the Jum'ah, and he needs to pray 4 rak'ahs, which are the dhuhr. If the Imam moved to a next pillar, then the follower needs to leave what he does and follow the Imam. So for example, the Imam said, Sami Allahu liman hamida. The person is still saying, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdih. Subhana Rabbi. And he is just taking his time. It's good actually to do that, but on your own. If the Imam stood, then you should cut short and then follow the Imam. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, the Imam was made to be followed, not to do our own. So we need to catch up with the Imam all the time.
Can you cut the Fatiha if you're not done?
Can you cut the Fatiha? That's a good question. I came to the rak'ah, I don't know whether actually he finished Al-Fatiha or it's a rak'ah number 3 or number 4 or number 1 or 2 from Salat al-Dhuhr, for example. I started, he already started, I don't know when. So I need to know what to do. Shall I start with Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik wa tabarak asmak, which is the dua before I start, or wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal ard, or I start straight away with Al-Fatiha? And what happens if I start? Of course, if you don't know, you have to start straight away with Al-Fatiha. Because if you started with the dua, and then the Imam said, Allahu Akbar, Subhan Rabbi al-Azim. Actually, you did the dua, but during that time of dua, you could have finished Al-Fatiha. Now you have a problem, because you are stuck with Al-Fatiha, because you had the chance to do it. So the scholars said, you need, at the beginning, to start, forget about the dua, straight to Al-Fatiha. If the Imam said, Allahu Akbar, and went to the ruku', speed up, finish Al-Fatiha. If the Imam was fast and said, Sami Allahu liman hamida, and you did not finish Al-Fatiha, just go for ruku'. The time that was for you to read whatever you are in the Fatiha is enough for you. Okay? So try always to finish with or to follow the Imam. If the Imam made a mistake and stood for a 5th rak'ah, what should the followers do? Should they follow him? If they stand and follow him, their prayer is invalid. That's it. They need to repeat the prayer. Why? Because that's a mistake and they know. The Imam does not know. The Imam forgot. So they need to stick. And the Imam insisted and kept standing and continued his rak'ah. They need to stick. They see him insisting, not understanding what they are saying to him. They can say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, without the Imam. Okay? So you do not follow the Imam if the Imam made a mistake, which is obvious, and you know that this can invalidate. Because making mistakes in pillars like this, it invalidates the prayer. Some conditions for the followers to follow the Imam. Follower to have intention to follow the Imam. So you have to have that intention that I'm following that Imam. You don't need to pronounce it, as we said. The follower can pray with different intention than the Imam, as we said. Sometimes you are entering and you are praying, for example, you want to pray Dhuhr and they are praying Asr. So what to do? Can you pray with the different intentions? Some scholars said no, but there is no evidence for that you cannot. That's why Imam Shafi'i said, you can pray behind someone who's praying Sunnah, Fard, or behind someone who is praying Fard, Sunnah. What the others refer to is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Prophet ﷺ finished his prayer and someone came late and started praying, and the Prophet ﷺ said, who wants to donate on his brother? So one of the companions came and prayed next to him to make a jama'ah for his brother to take that reward of jama'ah. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ called it donate. The scholars that said it's only that case is allowed. Okay? Because it has been at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ approved it. Imam Shafi'i said, but the other cases did not happen, and there is no reason actually to invalidate or say that it's not permissible to pray behind someone. That's why, with a different intention. That's why, according to Imam Shafi'i, you can pray behind anyone, regardless of his intention. His sunnah, you are praying fard. His fard, you are praying sunnah. So long as you are not praying less rak'ahs than him. So you are not praying, for example, behind someone who is praying Isha, you are praying Fajr. Because you need to pray 2 rak'ahs, and he is praying 4 rak'ahs. If the other way around, it's acceptable. You are praying, for example, Asr behind someone who is praying Maghrib. You can. And you follow him with the 3 rak'ahs until he sits for tashahhud, and then he says salam. You stand up and continue rak'ah number 4. And that's how you make up your 4 rak'ahs in your prayer. The follower, yes.
If someone was praying, like for example, you missed the Jama'ah for, let's say, Maghrib, and there was a person, you came into the masjid and you see a person praying, but he's actually praying Sunnah, but you didn't know that and you went to join him.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. So long as after he finishes the 2 rak'ahs, you stand up and bring rak'ah number 3. The only time, or we will speak about it later, inshallah. Praying at the same place. Okay. One of the conditions for the follower is that the ankle of the follower is not ahead of the ankle of the imam. That invalidates the prayer. So that's why sometimes at the imam level, they will put, for example, lines outside the masjid for people to pray if there is no space. So what will happen, they will put the latest line to make sure that the ankle of all those who are aligned will not be ahead of the ankle of the imam. If the ankle is ahead, like these 2 feet, and this is the follower, and he ahead of the imam, his prayer is invalid. So he cannot pray ahead of the imam. One of the nice quotations. Supposedly, for example, the imam is Jubair. What's the size of your... what is this? 7, size 7. And the follower of Jubair is size 11. So he's putting his ankle behind him, but his toes are way above or ahead of him. They said so long as the ankle is behind, that's not a problem, even if the toes are actually ahead of the imam. So the consideration for the ankle. Another thing which is praying behind the imam, where you can see the imam, or you can see a line of those who are praying, and you can hear. So someone will say, I want to pray behind the imam of Al-Haram while I'm here in Australia. Can I pray? I will open the TV, he is praying, and then I will stand and I will make jama'ah with him and pray with him. Can I pray? Because I'm seeing him and I'm here listening to him. These rulings, when the scholars they put them based on what they used to have. They did not know that one day we will just see the imam and we will hear the imam while we are on the other side of the wall. Of course, that cannot. And you cannot have actually gaps between the lines that are following the imam. And the scholars even they set the maximum distance that is allowed between the 2 lines to be considered following the jama'ah. So it's not going to be specific, because if you look at some of the cases, actually you are going to have a gap of walls or gardens for the masjid. People are praying in the street, and then you have a garden, and then people are praying inside, and so on. All of these are under consideration case by case. This is allowed to be following the imam. The follower must follow the imam and not be ahead of him. because that will invalidate as well the prayer. So if someone, for example, is behind the Imam and then the Imam finished Surah Al-Fatiha and finished the other surah, so he's going to go to ruku'. So the person straight away went to ruku' before the Imam. That invalidates the prayer. So you cannot actually go ahead of the Imam. You can match the Imam. That's called following. You need to be behind him, that's the best. You cannot be ahead of him, that will invalidate the prayer. Some rules. So as the Prophet ﷺ used to do, the Prophet ﷺ used to pray and all the companions will be aligned behind him. If one follower, then where to sit, to stand? If the Imam and someone, only one person is praying behind him, where to on the right hand side. And the hadith of Ibn Abbas, he came to Maymuna's house and the Prophet ﷺ was praying, so he wanted to pray with the Rasul of the Prophet ﷺ. He came to his left and prayed, so the Prophet ﷺ during the prayer grabbed him and put him on his right. So that's a hadith to show that if only one is follower in the prayer, then he needs to be on the right. What if it's your wife that is following? It needs to be behind. Of course, we know that the lines of the men come and then the lines of the women. What about nowadays? They sometimes make the women on a section to the right hand side, so they will be side by side with the men. So long as they are not interacting, that's not a problem.
But the one person on the right, is it the same level or one that is alone?
You will see some masjids now, they are at the same level as the men. So long as they are behind the Imam, that's the concept. So if they are at the same level with the men, but they are behind the Imam, that's not a problem. So the whole idea is to be behind the Imam.
And for men with another man, 2%.
2%.
So on Rasulullah pulling to the right, is the line, same level, or the...
We said you need to have the ankle behind. At least the ankle behind. Not 100%. It needs to be a little bit behind. Imam usually needs to stand in the middle and the line behind him. And by the way, of course, we can have the Imam, like what we spoke about the women, the Imam standing, and if there is no space, people are next to him, but a little bit to the back and then continuing. So we can have that as well. The Imam should order the followers to straighten their lines. The Prophet ﷺ used to, before starting the prayer, say, straighten your line. سَوُّ صُفُوفَكُمْ. The companions used to say, we will be standing in the prayer and our shoulders are touching the shoulders of our brothers and our feet are touching the feet of our brothers. Can someone tell me nowadays how is the situation? Nobody would like to touch nobody. Subhanallah. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, touch, you will have mercy with each other. And that's one of the key things. When we stand for prayer and we are touching each other, you will feel the mercy. It's like connection. Especially when there is no room and you just force one to come in the line and you have extra people and they are really touching each other, you will have that mercy. Even some of the scholars, like if you look at Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal opinion with that the whole leg should be attached to the leg of the neighbor. So that's how they think the sunnah is. What about someone who came late and there is no spot inside that line? And what to do? He starts a new line, or we know that some people pull someone from there and he does not want and he just resists and things start becoming aggressive. And what to do? Can I start a new line alone? Or should I wait for someone? What if the prayer is going to finish? and I'm not going to catch the prayer? Shall I grab someone from the front? They are all referring to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, the only one who rejects is Imam Ahmad. Imam Ahmad said, you cannot be in a line alone. And he is relying on a hadith which is authentic. That the Prophet ﷺ once saw someone praying alone behind the line, and he said to him, repeat your prayer. So Imam Ahmad concluded from that hadith that you cannot pray alone. Regardless, the other scholars, they said, no, you can be the core for a new line, and so on. Imam Shafi'i, for that dispute, said, okay, I want to go out of that dispute. So what does Imam Shafi'i say? You stand up and you grab someone and put him next to you, in order to avoid actually the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which invalidates the prayer of the one who prays alone in the line. So it's better actually to grab someone next to you, so you do not actually apply the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and you need to repeat the prayer.
Someone from outside or someone from the front?
No, from the, if you can bring someone to pray in the masjid, that's better. But if you cannot, just grab someone who is praying already and then grab him.
What if they don't want to?
Grab someone else. I saw a case that was really funny. It was only one line, and then what happened is that the person wanted, of course, he starts where? Behind the Imam. So he started behind the Imam, and then he grabbed the person behind the Imam to be next to him. And then what's going to happen now? There is a gap inside. He stepped in front and took his spot. So sometimes, and this is I saw actually, and then behind the Imam someone is making up prayers after he finishes. We finished, and the one who is behind still is praying behind. So it appeared that he grabbed him back and then he took his spot in the front. So Imam can drag someone to complete the prayer, as we said, if something happened to him and he lost his wudu. Now let's speak about Friday prayer. Narrated Abdullah ibn Umar, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, anyone of you attending the Friday prayer should take a bath. So that's why they said it's, whether it's obligation or sunnah or what, in regards to the bath, we are going to speak about it. Narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, the taking of a bath on Friday is compulsory for every male Muslim who has attained the age of puberty. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the word, it's obligatory on each muhtalim. The word muhtalim can be interpreted as the one who reached puberty or the one who had a wet dream. So that's why the scholars, they said, okay, because there are two meanings for that word, it can be that it is sunnah to do it, not actually obligation. That's why the ghusl or the shower of Friday is sunnah, not compulsory. Narrated Abu Sa'id, I testify that Allah's Messenger said, the taking of a bath on Friday is compulsory for every male Muslim who has attained the age of puberty, and also the cleaning of his teeth with siwak and the using of perfume if it is available. So these three things the Prophet ﷺ ordered the companions to do. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, any person who takes a bath on Friday, like the bath of janaba, and then goes for the prayer in the first hour early, it is as if he had sacrificed a camel in Allah's cause. And whoever goes in the second hour, it is as if he had sacrificed a cow. And whoever goes in the third hour, as if he sacrificed a horned ram. And if he goes in the fourth hour, as if he sacrificed a hen. And the fourth hour, as if he sacrificed an egg. When the Imam comes out, start delivering the khutbah, the angels present themselves to listen to the khutbah. They close the records and they don't record any rewards for people again. So the scholars differed. What are these 5 hours? Are they actually literal 5 hours before the Friday prayer? In the winter, it's going to be Fajr. So meaning that people are going to go after Fajr to go to Friday in order to catch the first. No, the scholars, they said it's the last hour before Friday. So last hour, if Friday prayer is at 12:30, so from 11:30 to 12:30. So if you go at 11:30, you catch so you divide the last hour before Friday into 5 pieces or 5 divisions, and that's how it is meant to. Narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ said, allow women to go to the mosque at night. So that's actually to indicate that women can go to the masjids and they can go at night as well. Narrated Yahya ibn Sa'id, I asked Amra about taking a bath on Friday. She replied, Aisha said the people used to work for their livelihood, and whenever they went for the Jum'ah prayer, they used to go to the mosque in the same shape as they had been in work, so they were asked to take a bath on Friday. So that's an explanation. That actually the person, if he is working and his work is physical and he's sweating and so on, so it is better to go and take a bath and change the clothes and put perfume and so on. Narrated Anas ibn Malik, the Prophet ﷺ used to offer the Jum'ah prayer immediately after midday. Now to speak about what is the timing. So immediately after midday, the Prophet ﷺ used to perform Jum'ah. Narrated Abu Huraira heard Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, if the prayer is started, do not run for it, but just walk for it calmly and pray whatever you get and complete whatever is missed. That's how to go to Friday prayer. Go calmly, like what we go to any other prayer, we go calmly. Narrated Salman al-Farisi, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, anyone who takes a bath on Friday and cleanses himself as much as he can and puts oil on his hair or scent himself and then proceeds for the prayer and does not force his way between 2 persons, meaning that pushing people when you enter to the masjid, pushing people and stepping behind the shoulders, and prays as much as is written for him and remains quiet when the Imam delivers the khutbah, all his sins in between the present and the last Friday will be forgiven. So that's by actually doing the proper way of. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, when the Imam is delivering the khutbah and you ask your companion to keep quiet and listen, then there is no doubt you have done an evil act. So you cannot say even to your neighbor, be quiet. You can just point, but you cannot say anything. You should not. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger ﷺ talked about Friday and said, there is an hour, opportune time on Friday, and if a Muslim gets it while praying and asks something from Allah, then Allah will definitely meet his demand. And the Prophet ﷺ pointed out the shortness of that time with his hand. So saying that it's a very short time. We are going to use all of these hadith when we are going to speak about the rulings. Friday prayer. Whoever denies Friday prayer is not a Muslim. So if someone says, no, Friday prayer is not from Islam, outside. Who can say to us what's the evidence for that? Quran. فإذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع. And if the call for Friday came, then go to prayer and leave everything. So that's why it's compulsory according to the verse of the Quran. And if anyone denies it, then he is denying a verse of the Quran. And if anyone denies one verse of the Quran, he is out of Islam. So he denies the whole Quran. Who is the first one who conducted Jum'ah? Friday prayer, not the Prophet ﷺ. The Jum'ah prayer was conducted when the Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca. So it was revealed for him to conduct the Friday prayer when he was in Mecca. And of course he cannot gather the Muslims and do Friday prayer in Mecca because they were weak and the Quraysh were actually attacking them. So he sent a letter to Mus'ab bin Umair because he was there in Medina. And he informed him to make a Friday prayer. And Mus'ab bin Umair was the first one who was conducting Friday prayer. And that was the start of the Friday prayer. So not by the Prophet ﷺ, but in Medina with Mus'ab. What is the wisdom for Friday prayer? Of course, all of these gatherings and people will see each other and meet. Coming early to Friday, as we said, all the reward from the hadith that we mentioned. Forgiveness between the two Fridays, we mentioned the hadith how if the person actually is performing the Friday properly, he will be forgiven. Time of acceptance of dua, as the hadith that we said that there is a time of acceptance of dua and it's a short. The Prophet ﷺ pointed by his fingers, it's a short. The scholars, they said that it's between the Imam going to his minbar until finishing his khutbah. You know how the Imam in the middle he will give time to istighfar? The scholars, they said that is the time where you make dua, and that's how it is the time of acceptance. Selling at the time of Jum'ah, of course, it's haram. You cannot sell at the time of Friday prayer because Allah Azza wa Jal said, leave the selling and go to Jum'ah. It is an obligation on sane people, Muslim people, free people, not sick or traveling, male, those who reached puberty. So anyone who does not pray with all of these in him, the Prophet ﷺ said, who misses 3 Jum'ah prayers without a valid reason, Allah will stamp on his heart. What does the Prophet ﷺ mean when he said stamp on his heart? Like close on his heart and there is no light can come again to his heart. So it is really a dangerous thing to miss Friday prayer. It is dangerous thing to miss the start of the prayer or the khutbah by the Imam. When the Imam says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, we know that angels will close the books, no more records. So we need to come actually when? Before the Imam goes to the khutbah. We need to be there sitting waiting for him. Not him starting and then we are joining.
For example, you said you can't do any business while there's Jummah going on. For example, we're in a non-Muslim country and I have a business in a place where it needs to be on at that time. But if I leave any non-Muslims there, but me and all the other Muslim workers are going for Jummah, is that allowed?
You have to go for Jummah.
Yeah, I mean,
Put
keeping the business open with non-Muslims, like workers, staff workers and stuff.
Of course, they are not going to go for Friday, but that will go to another concept.
That money.
Just a second. Which is the concept of, are the non-Muslims accountable for all the details of Sharia? And we mentioned about this before. Which is, okay, the non-Muslims are going to be questioned in the Day of Judgment for not fasting, for not praying, for not. Well, according to the majority of the scholars, yes. And based on that opinion, you should not be helping them in missing something like this. Although Imam Abu Hanifa says, no, they are not going to be questioned. But the verse in Surah Al-Muddathir clearly states that the kuffar or the non-Muslims in the Day of Judgment, they will be saying, we were not praying and we were not feeding the poor. That's where they drove actually to hellfire, meaning that they are questioned about praying, well, whereas they are not Muslims. So that's why the scholars, the majority of them, they said yes, they will be questioned about the details of Sharia and that should not be helping them. Like for example in Ramadan, if you are running a restaurant, can you open the restaurants for the non-Muslims? That's another question, which is similar to the question, can you open the shop, for example, for during Friday prayer? It's a similar question. For me, as I said, I will not do it, but there is an opinion, there is an opinion. So Imam Abu Hanifa allows it, yeah. But the majority of the scholars, they said no. Jum'ah and Eid prayer, sometimes they come on Friday. So Jum'ah obviously comes on Friday, but Eid prayer sometimes comes on Friday. Whether we start the fight, is it one khutbah or two khutbahs? Do I need to go to Friday or I don't need to go to Friday? It's all of this mess that happens all over and all over again. These are two opinions, but there is no one better than the other. So I prefer to pray Jum'ah, even though I pray Eid, because it's compulsory according to the verse of the Quran. The verse of the Quran was general, did not specify if there is Eid or no Eid. It was general, so I prefer to go with that, and it's better to stick to it. We know that Jum'ah is 2 rak'ahs and 2 khutbahs. The time is for the time of Dhuhr prayer, from the Dhuhr prayer until Adhan al-Asr. Jum'ah will be achieved by catching the ruku' of the second rak'ah. Has to be in a city or a village, and can be actually in the outside if there is the amount or the number of people that is required. Can't be except Jama'ah. Nobody can pray Jum'ah alone. The number of attendance is debatable, and that's all based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Once the Prophet ﷺ was giving a khutbah, and then a caller for some trading was calling outside. Some people left the khutbah. So the companions said, we counted 15. So that's why some of the scholars, they stick to 15. Imam Abu Hanifa said, well, whatever is the jama'ah can be called the jama'ah, we will stick with it. So he's go for 3. So the Jum'ah can be done with 3. Imam Shafi and Imam Ahmad said, no, 40. 40 is the minimum, including the Imam. Any basis for any of the 3 opinions? No basis. So no strong evidence for any of the 3 opinions. That's why whatever can be called the Jama'ah is applicable for Friday. Can be prayed anywhere, can have more than one in the place. The pillars of khutbah, what can be done or what should be done in order for the khutbah to be complete. The Imam needs to say Alhamdulillah, needs to pray on the Prophet ﷺ, say Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, needs to advise on taqwa, needs to recite at least one verse of the Quran, and needs to make the dua for the believers. And these are the 5 pillars of the khutbah. Sunnah of the khutbah, to have wudu. It's sunnah in the khutbah to have wudu. So can I make Friday khutbah without wudu? Yes. But can I pray Friday without wudu? Cannot. So when it comes to salah, I cannot. But if the imam, the khatib, lost his wudu while he is on the khutbah, then he can continue, but before he prays, he needs to make wudu. It's sunnah to be on a minbar, a higher place, because the Prophet ﷺ used to have a minbar. Sitting on the minbar before starting the khutbah. So the Prophet ﷺ used to say Assalamu alaikum and sit on the minbar. Face the people, saying Assalamu alaikum. To have one muadhin, starting with praising Allah and shahadatain, making people hear. So it's sunnah to have loud voice, but nowadays we have all of these mics. You don't need to have loud voice. You can do just normal voice. Leaning on the stick in his left hand. The Prophet ﷺ used to lean on a stick. So it's sunnah. Making the khutbah short. Not like nowadays in some masjids here in Adelaide, it's 45 minutes. And it's in Arabic. And then you are stuck. You need to wait until they finish, because you cannot leave the masjid. So you get stuck, and what to do? So it's sunnah actually to be very short. Just straight to the point. Listening during the khutbah is sunnah. It's not supposed to be talking during the khutbah. But why did the scholars say that listening during the khutbah is sunnah? Because the Prophet ﷺ once was giving a khutbah. There is a hadith. Once in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, the people were afflicted with drought. While the Prophet ﷺ was delivering the khutbah on Friday, a Bedouin stood up and said, "O Allah's Apostle, our possessions are being destroyed and the children are hungry. Please invoke Allah for rain." So the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands. At that time, there was not a trace of cloud in the sky. By him in whose hand my soul is, as soon as he lowered his hands, cloud gathered like mountains, and before he got down from the pulpit, I saw the rain falling on the beard of the Prophet ﷺ. It rained that day, the next day, and the third day, the fourth day, till the next Friday. The same Bedouin or another man stood up and said, "O Allah's Apostle, the houses have been collapsed, our possessions and livestock have been drowned. Please invoke Allah." So the Prophet ﷺ raised both his hands and said, "O Allah, round about us and not on us." Do you understand what happened? With the same rain that the Prophet ﷺ made, the rain became severe that actually it affected negatively the people. So another person came and said, "O Messenger of Allah, the rain is destroying us." So the Prophet ﷺ made dua and said, "Round about us and not on us." So in whatever direction he pointed with his hands, the clouds disappeared or dispersed and cleared away. And Medina's sky became clear as a hole in between the clouds. The valley of Qanat remained flooded for 1 month. None came from outside but talked about the abundant rain. So this is, who can get out from this something? This is an evidence that during khutbah someone talked. But he did not speak about normal stuff. He was asking the Prophet ﷺ about a main issue, a main concern. That's why the scholars, they said it's sunnah not to talk, all of them. But sitting next to one, how's your work, what have you done, that's not the talk that is permissible. Because the Prophet ﷺ in another hadith said, whoever told his neighbor to keep quiet, he has done laghu. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever has done laghu in Jum'ah has no prayer. So meaning that it's not going to be counted, or it's not counted. He's not going to be rewarded for that. Why? Because it's laghu, and the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلَا جُمْعَةَ لَهُ. He has no Jum'ah. Welcoming the masjid with 2 rak'ahs. The Prophet ﷺ once was giving khutbah and someone came and sat down, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "Did you pray 2 rak'ahs? No, stand and pray 2 rak'ahs and make them fast." It is makrouh to leave any sunnah. It is makrouh to step on the shoulders of the Muslims. It is makrouh to sit on the back and stretch the arms. You know this sitting. They just tilt their knees and then sit on the back and then put the arms like this, stretch them. It is makrouh to do that. It is a difference in opinion for doing this. The Prophet ﷺ in an authentic hadith in Bukhari was seen doing this in the masjid. And in another hadith he said, if you are going to masjid, do not do this with your fingers. Do not put your fingers together. So it's a 2 different hadiths, but the hadith of the Bukhari is the strongest one, and that's why we cannot say that it's actually makruh to put the fingers together, but it's an opinion. There is a difference in opinion about putting the fingers together. Sunnah of the Friday, ghusl, going early, cleaning the body, reading Surah Al-Kahf, increase in dua, increase in prayer of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, increase your praying on me, reading loud in prayer, reading as-sajda and al-insan in al-fajr, pray 4 rak'ahs before and 4 rak'ahs after the Friday prayer. We stop at the prayer of the traveler. And next time, inshallah, we'll start with the prayer of the traveler. Let's see. Not many, alhamdulillah. Previously, you mentioned that if a man and woman are praying side by side in jama'ah, he needs to keep a person gap in between. Does the same still apply if a husband is praying in jama'ah only with wife? No, because they were both praying behind a different imam. So the imam is ahead of them. But when the man and the wife are praying, they cannot be at the same level. She needs to be in the back. So that is like, for example, when we spoke about praying in Mecca, in the Kaaba, and women are men next to each other, at least we need to have one person place empty because they are all following an imam. But if the husband and the wife, no, it's not the same case. If the follower's ankle is behind the imam when standing, but during sujood the follower head past the imam, being a tall follower, is the prayer valid? Yes. As we said, it's all about your whole body, because the ankle actually states from where your whole body will start. Regardless of where your whole body will end in sujood, if someone is in hearing distance of adhan from his home but prays at home, will his prayer be valid? It is valid, but it is makrouh. So it is makrouh if you are neighbor of the masjid to pray except in the masjid. Okay? جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.